Good evening, dear travelers, and welcome back to Snug as a Bug. I am Atticus, your guide for tonight's journey through the ancient Greek world of myths and legends. Settle into the comfort of your bed. Let your body sink into the softness beneath you and gently release the weight of the day with a slow, deep breath in and out. You are safe, calm, and ready to embark on a journey through time.
Tonight we embark on an epic journey alongside Heracles, the mightiest hero of Greek mythology, as he faces 12 legendary trials set before him by the gods. Cursed by Hera's wrath and driven to atone for a tragic past, Heracles must complete these near-impossible tasks to prove his strength, courage, and endurance. From slaying the monstrous Nemean lion with his bare hands to capturing the elusive golden hind of Artemis, from battling the 9-headed Hydra to cleansing the filth-ridden Augean stables in a single day, each labor tests not only his physical prowess, but also his wisdom and determination. Guided by the favor of Zeus, yet constantly challenged by the vengeful Hera, Heracles encounters fearsome beasts, cunning adversaries, and divine intervention at every turn. Along the way, he wrestles with fate, confronts his own limitations, and discovers the true essence of heroism. His journey is one of suffering and triumph, toil and glory, as he fights to carve his name into the annals of immortality.
Before we immerse ourselves in the legendary tales of gods and heroes, let's take a moment to fully relax and unwind. Gently close your eyes and allow your body to settle, feeling the soft embrace of your bed beneath you. Take a long, slow inhale, and then a deep exhale, releasing any lingering tension with your breath. With each cycle of breath, your body grows lighter, your mind becomes still, and your heart beats in a calm, steady rhythm. Imagine now that you are standing on a quiet hill at dusk, overlooking the rolling fields of ancient Greece. The warm breeze carries the scent of olive trees, and the distant murmur of the sea echoes faintly in the background. Above you, the night sky stretches wide, a canvas of deep indigo dotted with shimmering stars. Each star holds a story, a tale whispered by the gods themselves, waiting to be heard. Feel the soft grass beneath your feet, cool and comforting, as you look out over the horizon. The sky is bathed in the golden glow of twilight, and the world around you is still, peaceful, and timeless. The air is filled with a sense of magic, as though the very land is alive with ancient energy. As you stand here, allow yourself to become one with this ancient world. Feel the gentle pulse of the earth beneath you, steady and eternal. You are safe, cradled by the calm of the night and the deep history that surrounds you. Now, as you breathe deeply, feel yourself being drawn into the world of myth. The stories are waiting to unfold, to carry you on a journey through the realms of gods and mortals, of heroes and legends. You are ready to begin, ready to hear the tales that have echoed through time. Let go of the world around you and allow these ancient myths to carry you into a deep, peaceful sleep. Chapter 1. The Origins of Heracles. Long before the tales of his labors spread across the mortal world, Heracles was known by another name, Alcides, son of Zeus, born to the mortal woman Alcmene. His birth was both a blessing and a curse, for though he was born of divine power, he was destined for a life filled with hardship and struggle. The story of Heracles' birth begins with Zeus's unquenchable desire for greatness. In the depth of Olympus, Zeus had long watched the world of mortals, admiring their resilience, their tenacity, and their will to survive. But in them, he also saw potential to rise beyond their mortal limits and achieve true greatness, if only they had the strength and guidance of a god. It was with this in mind that Zeus descended to earth in the form of Alcmene's husband, Amphitryon. Alcmene, a woman of great beauty and virtue, unknowingly welcomed Zeus into her bed, believing him to be her husband returning from battle. It was through this union that Heracles, or Alcid as he was called at birth, came into the world. From the moment of his birth, Heracles was marked by divine favor, his strength and power evident even in infancy. Hera, however, the wife of Zeus, was far from pleased. Her jealousy, a constant flame that burned within her, was stoked into a raging fire by the knowledge of her husband's infidelity. She harbored a deep and abiding hatred for Heracles, knowing that he was a constant reminder of Zeus's betrayal. Hera's vengeance would follow Heracles throughout his life, beginning even before he could walk. One night, as Alcmene lay with her newborn son, Hera sent 2 serpents into the crib, hoping to strangle the infant in his sleep. But when the serpents coiled around the child's limbs, Heracles did not cry out in fear. Instead, with a strength that belied his tiny form, he grasped the serpents in his hands and squeezed until their lifeless bodies fell limp. Alcmene awoke to the sight of her child, smiling and unafraid, clutching the dead serpents in his hands. It was then that she knew her son was no ordinary mortal. He was a child of Zeus, destined for greatness, but also for unimaginable trials. As Heracles grew, his strength became the stuff of legend. By the time he reached manhood, he had already performed feats that would have secured his place in history, slaying wild beasts, defending his people from invaders, and performing acts of heroism that earned him the love and admiration of mortals everywhere. Yet, despite his strength and divine lineage, Heracles was not immune to the weaknesses of mortals. His temper, fiery and unpredictable, often led him into trouble, and it was this temper that would ultimately lead to his greatest trial. One day, in a fit of madness sent by Hera, Heracles committed an unspeakable act. In his delirium, he killed his own wife, Megara, and their children, believing them to be enemies sent to destroy him. When the madness passed, Heracles was left with the horror of what he had done, the blood of his family staining his hands. Desperate for redemption, Heracles sought out the oracle of Delphi, hoping to find a way to atone for his sins. The oracle, her voice echoing with the wisdom of the gods, decreed that Heracles must serve King Eurystheus of Tiryns and perform 10 labors, impossible tasks that would test the very limits of his strength and endurance. Thus began the journey of Heracles, a journey that would take him to the farthest corners of the earth and beyond, a journey that would cement his place as the greatest hero in Greek mythology. Chapter 2. The First Labor, the Nemean Lion. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the hills of Nemea as Heracles set out on his first labor. His task, given to him by the cruel and cowardly King Eurystheus, was to slay the Nemean lion. A monstrous beast, with a hide so thick and impenetrable that no weapon of man could pierce it. The people of Nemea had long lived in fear of the lion, its roars echoing through the mountains, a constant reminder of the death and destruction it brought with it. Many had tried to kill the beast, but all had failed, their weapons shattering against its impenetrable skin. As Heracles approached the lair of the lion, nestled deep within a dark, foreboding cave, he felt a surge of determination. This was no ordinary beast. This was a creature sent by the gods, a test of his strength and his will. But Heracles was no ordinary man. He was the son of Zeus, and he would not be defeated. The entrance to the cave was wide and dark, the air thick with the smell of decay. Bones littered the ground, the remains of those who had fallen prey to the lion. Heracles tightened his grip on his club, his muscles tensing in anticipation. As he ventured deeper into the cave, the darkness swallowed him whole. The sound of his footsteps echoed off the stone walls, the only noise in the oppressive silence. And then, from the shadows, came a low, rumbling growl. The Nemean lion emerged from the darkness, its golden eyes gleaming in the dim light, its massive form dwarfing even Heracles. Its fur, thick and matted, seemed to shimmer with an unnatural sheen, and its jaws, lined with sharp, glistening teeth, snapped open and closed with a menacing snarl. Heracles wasted no time. He swung his club with all his might, aiming for the lion's head, but the blow, which would have felled any other creature, merely bounced off the lion's hide, leaving the beast unharmed. The lion roared in fury, lunging at Heracles with terrifying speed. But Heracles was not easily deterred. He dodged the lion's attack, his mind racing as he considered his next move. His weapons were useless. He had seen that now. But Heracles was nothing if not resourceful. Realizing that brute force alone would not be enough to defeat the lion, Heracles devised a plan. He waited for the beast to charge at him again, and as it did, he grabbed hold of its massive head, his powerful arms wrapping around its neck. The lion thrashed and roared, its claws raking at Heracles' skin, but he held on, tightening his grip until, finally, with one last mighty effort, he snapped the lion's neck. The beast fell to the ground, its body lifeless at Heracles' feet. The son of Zeus stood over the fallen creature, his chest heaving with exertion. But there was no sense of victory in his heart, only a grim determination. This was only the beginning. Taking the lion's hide, Heracles fashioned it into a cloak, draping the impenetrable fur over his shoulders as both armor and trophy. It would serve as a reminder of his first labor and of the many more that lay ahead. Chapter 3. The Second Labor, the Lernaean Hydra. Heracles' second labor took him to the swampy marshes of Lerna, where another monstrous creature awaited him, the Hydra. This multi-headed serpent, born from the depths of the underworld, was a creature of pure evil, its venomous breath capable of killing a man with a single inhale. But the true danger of the Hydra lay not in its poisonous fangs, but in its regenerative abilities. Each time one of its heads was cut off, two more would grow in its place. As Heracles made his way through the murky swamps, the air thick with the stench of decay, he could hear the hissing of the Hydra in the distance. The creature had made its lair deep within the marshes, its many heads rising and falling like serpents in the water. The Hydra, like the Nemean lion, was a creature of divine origin, sent by Hera to destroy Heracles. But Heracles was undeterred. He had faced monsters before, and he would face them again. This labor would be no different. As he reached the lair of the Hydra, Heracles was greeted by the sight of the creature's many heads, each one snapping and hissing, its eyes glowing with malevolent intelligence. The Hydra's massive body, covered in thick, scaly skin, writhed and twisted in the water, its many heads moving in perfect unison. Heracles knew that this battle would require more than just brute strength. He had brought with him a torch, the flame flickering in the damp air, and he had enlisted the help of his nephew, Iolaos, who stood by his side, ready to assist in any way he could. With a roar, Heracles charged at the Hydra, his sword slashing through the air as he severed one of the creature's heads. But no sooner had the head fallen to the ground than two more sprouted in its place, their venomous fangs snapping at Heracles with deadly precision. Undeterred, Heracles continued to fight, each strike of his sword cutting through the Hydra's heads, but with every blow the creature grew stronger, its many heads multiplying with terrifying speed. Realizing that he could not defeat the Hydra with his sword alone, Heracles called out to Iolaus, who quickly brought the torch to the severed necks of the Hydra. The flames cauterized the wounds, preventing the heads from regrowing. Together, Heracles and Iolaus worked in perfect harmony, cutting off the Hydra's heads and sealing the wounds with fire. The battle raged on for what felt like hours, but eventually the Hydra lay dead at their feet, its body lifeless and unmoving. Heracles wiped the sweat from his brow, his muscles aching from the effort. The Hydra had been a formidable foe, but once again Heracles had emerged victorious. Chapter 4. The Third Labor. The Ceryneian Hind. The third labor of Heracles was unlike the others. While the Nemean lion and the Lenaean hydra had been monstrous creatures that posed a direct threat to the people of Greece, the Ceryneian hind was a creature of divine beauty, sacred to the goddess Artemis. The hind was a magnificent creature, its coat gleaming with a golden sheen, its antlers long and graceful, reaching high into the sky. It was said to be so swift that no man could catch it, and so sacred that to harm it would bring the wrath of Artemis herself. Heracles' task was not to slay the hind, but to capture it alive and bring it back to King Eurystheus. But this task was not as simple as it seemed. The hind, being a creature of divine origin, was elusive, its speed unmatched by any mortal or immortal. For a full year, Heracles pursued the hind, tracking it through the forests, over mountains, and across rivers. Each time he thought he had caught up to it, the creature would vanish, its swift hooves carrying it far beyond his reach. But Heracles was nothing if not persistent. He followed the hind across the entire land of Greece, his determination never wavering. And finally, after a year of relentless pursuit, he found the hind resting near a stream, its golden coat gleaming in the sunlight. With great care and respect, Heracles approached the creature, his movements slow and deliberate. He knew that he could not simply capture the hind through force. It required finesse, patience, and most of all, respect for the creature's divine nature. As Heracles reached out to the hind, he whispered a prayer to Artemis, asking for her forgiveness and guidance. The hind, sensing his sincerity, allowed him to place his hands on its golden antlers, and with a gentle pull, Heracles led the creature back to King Eurystheus. The king, ever the coward, had hoped that Heracles would fail in his task, knowing that the wrath of Artemis would surely follow if the hind were harmed. But Heracles, with his wisdom and respect for the gods, had succeeded without incurring the goddess's anger. Artemis, watching from her place in the heavens, smiled down upon Heracles, recognizing his skill and reverence. She allowed him to return the hind to the wild, where it continued to roam, a symbol of beauty, grace, and the harmony between man and nature. Chapter 5. The Fourth Labor, the Erymanthian Boar. For his fourth labor, Heracles was tasked with capturing the Erymanthian boar, a massive and fearsome creature that roamed the snow-capped peaks of Mount Erymanthos. The boar, with its enormous tusks and ferocious temper, had been terrorizing the local villages, destroying crops and homes with its rampages. Heracles set out for the mountains, his breath forming clouds in the cold, thin air. The climb to the summit was treacherous, the rocky path slick with ice and snow, but Heracles was no stranger to hardship, and he pressed on, his determination driving him forward. As he neared the summit, Heracles heard the distant sound of the boar's snorting, a deep, rumbling noise that reverberated through the mountain pass. He tightened his grip on his spear, his muscles tensing in anticipation of the battle to come. When he finally reached the boar's lair, Heracles was greeted by the sight of the massive beast, its tusks gleaming in the pale winter light. The boar, sensing the presence of the hero, let out a deafening roar, its hooves kicking up snow as it charged at Heracles with terrifying speed. But Heracles was ready. With a swift motion, he sidestepped the boar's charge, his spear raised in defense. The boar, enraged by the near miss, turned and charged again, its tusks slashing through the air with deadly intent. Heracles knew that he could not kill the boar. His task was to capture it alive, and so he waited for the perfect moment, his eyes never leaving the boar as it circled him, its breath coming in heavy, ragged bursts. Finally, as the boar charged at him once more, Heracles sprang into action. With a powerful leap, he landed on the boar's back, his arms wrapping around its massive neck. The boar thrashed and bucked, its tusks gouging deep furrows in the snow, but Heracles held on, his grip unyielding. With a mighty effort, Heracles wrestled the boar to the ground, pinning it beneath him. The beast let out a final defeated roar before falling silent, its body heaving with exhaustion. Heracles, breathing heavily from the effort, tied the boar's legs with thick rope, ensuring that the creature could not escape. He then hoisted the massive beast onto his shoulders and began the long trek back to King Eurystheus. When Heracles arrived at the palace, the cowardly king was so terrified by the sight of the boar that he hid inside a large bronze jar, refusing to come out until the creature was taken far away. Heracles, ever dutiful, returned the boar to the wild, where it no longer posed a threat to the villagers. His fourth labor complete, Heracles knew that his journey was far from over. More trials awaited him, each more difficult and dangerous than the last. But Heracles, with his indomitable spirit and unshakable resolve, pressed on, ready to face whatever came next. Chapter 6. The Fifth Labor, the Augean Stables. Heracles' fifth labor was unlike any he had faced before. There were no monsters to slay, no beasts to capture. Instead, his task was one of sheer endurance and determination. He was ordered to clean the Augean stables, home to thousands of cattle belonging to King Augeas. The stables had not been cleaned in over 30 years, and the filth had accumulated to such an extent that the task seemed impossible. The stench alone was enough to drive any man away, but Heracles was no ordinary man. Arriving at the stables, Heracles surveyed the scene before him. The vast pens were filled with cattle, their waste piled high in mounds that stretched as far as the eye could see. The ground was thick with mud and dung, and the air was heavy with the smell of decay. King Augeas, who had agreed to reward Heracles with a portion of his herd if he could complete the task in a single day, watched from a distance, confident that the hero would fail. But Heracles, ever resourceful, had a plan. Rather than attempting to shovel the filth by hand, Heracles decided to use the natural landscape to his advantage. Two rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, ran near the stables, and Heracles knew that if he could divert their course, the rushing waters would wash away the filth in a matter of hours. With his immense strength, Heracles redirected the flow of the rivers, sending the waters crashing through the stables. The force of the current swept away the filth, leaving the stables clean and fresh by the end of the day. King Augeas, shocked by Heracles' success, refused to honor his promise, claiming that the hero had used trickery rather than hard labor to complete the task. But Heracles, knowing that he had fulfilled his duty, left the kingdom without protest, his reputation as a hero intact. Chapter 7. The Sixth Labor, the Stymphalian Birds. For his sixth labor, Heracles was sent to the marshes of Stymphalos, where a flock of deadly birds had made their home. These birds, sacred to Ares, had feathers of bronze that they could shoot like arrows, and their beaks were sharp enough to pierce even the strongest armor. The birds had terrorized the people of the region, killing livestock and driving entire villages to abandon their homes. Heracles knew that confronting the birds directly would be a dangerous and potentially fatal mistake. Their numbers were too great, and their deadly feathers could strike from a distance, making it impossible to get close without being overwhelmed. Instead, Heracles devised a plan to drive the birds out of the marshes. He had been given a set of bronze clappers forged by Hephaestus, and he knew that the sound of the clappers would frighten the birds, forcing them into the open where he could deal with them. Arriving at the marshes, Heracles took up his position near the edge of the water, the bronze clappers in his hands. With a mighty crash, he slammed the clappers together, the sound ringing out across the marshes like a thunderclap. The birds, startled by the noise, took to the sky in a frenzy, their wings beating furiously as they fled from their nests. Heracles, seeing his opportunity, drew his bow and fired a volley of arrows into the sky, striking down the birds one by one. The remaining birds, terrified by the sound of the clappers and the deadly accuracy of Heracles' arrows, fled the marshes, never to return. Heracles, his sixth labor complete, returned to King Eurystheus, who once again marveled at the hero's ingenuity and strength. But there were still more labors to come, each one more dangerous than the last. Chapter 8. The Seventh Labor, the Cretan Bull. For his seventh labor, Heracles was sent to the island of Crete to capture the Cretan bull, a magnificent creature that had been terrorizing the island's inhabitants. The bull, with its gleaming white coat and immense size, had been a gift from Poseidon to King Minos. But when Minos failed to sacrifice the bull to the god of the sea, Poseidon cursed the animal, turning it into a rampaging beast. Heracles, ever the dutiful servant, set out for Crete, determined to capture the bull and bring it back to King Eurystheus. When he arrived on the island, he found the bull grazing in a meadow near the shore, its massive form casting a long shadow over the land. The bull, sensing Heracles' approach, let out a deafening bellow and charged at the hero with incredible speed. But Heracles was ready. With a swift motion, he dodged the bull's charge and grabbed hold of its horns, his powerful arms straining against the creature's immense strength. The bull thrashed and bucked, its hooves kicking up dirt as it tried to throw Heracles off, but the hero held firm, his grip unyielding. Slowly, Heracles began to wear the bull down, his muscles rippling with effort as he forced the creature to submit. With one final mighty effort, Heracles wrestled the bull to the ground, tying its legs with thick rope to prevent it from escaping. He then hoisted the massive creature onto his shoulders and carried it back to King Eurystheus. When Heracles arrived at the palace, the sight of the enormous bull struck fear into the heart of Eurystheus, who once again hid inside his bronze jar, too terrified to face the hero and his captured beast. Heracles, ever the dutiful servant, released the bull into the wild, where it no longer posed a threat to the people of Crete. His seventh labor complete, Heracles knew that the most difficult challenges still lay ahead. Chapter 9, the eighth labor, the mares of Diomedes. Heracles' eighth labor took him to the kingdom of Thrace, where the cruel and bloodthirsty King Diomedes kept a herd of wild, flesh-eating mares. These mares, fed on the flesh of men, were savage and uncontrollable, and Diomedes used them to terrorize his enemies and instill fear in his subjects. Heracles' task was to capture the mares and bring them back to King Eurystheus. But this labor would not be as simple as capturing the Cretan bull or the Erymanthian boar. The mares, driven mad by their diet of human flesh, were unpredictable and dangerous, and Heracles knew that he would need to be cautious. Arriving at Diomedes' palace, Heracles wasted no time in confronting the king. With a mighty blow, he struck Diomedes down, ending the tyrant's reign of terror and freeing the people of Thrace from his cruelty. With the king defeated, Heracles turned his attention to the mares, who were kept in a heavily fortified stable near the palace. Using his immense strength, Heracles broke down the doors of the stable and approached the wild mares, his eyes never leaving their snapping jaws and rolling eyes. The mares, sensing the presence of a new master, hesitated for a moment before charging at Heracles, their hooves pounding the ground with deadly force. But Heracles, ever the skilled warrior, dodged their attacks and grabbed hold of the reins, using his strength and skill to bring the wild creatures under control. With the mares subdued, Heracles led them back to King Eurystheus, who, as always, was too frightened to face the hero and his deadly captives. The mares, no longer a threat to the people of Thrace, were released into the wild, where they eventually roamed free, their savage instincts tamed by Heracles' mastery. Chapter 10, the ninth labor, the belt of Hippolyta. Heracles' ninth labor took him to the land of the Amazons, a fierce tribe of warrior women known for their skill in battle and their unwavering loyalty to their queen, Hippolyta. Heracles' task was to retrieve the belt of Hippolyta, a symbol of her power and authority, and bring it back to King Eurystheus as a gift for his daughter. The journey to the land of the Amazons was long and treacherous, but Heracles was no stranger to hardship. He sailed across the seas, his ship battered by storms and tossed by waves, until he finally arrived on the shores of the Amazon kingdom. Hippolyta, intrigued by the arrival of the famous hero, greeted Heracles with respect and offered him her belt as a gesture of goodwill. But Hera, ever the instigator, could not allow Heracles to succeed so easily. Disguised as one of the Amazons, Hera spread rumors among the warriors that Heracles had come to abduct their queen, and soon the entire tribe was in an uproar. The Amazons, believing their queen to be in danger, attacked Heracles with ferocity, their arrows raining down upon him like a deadly storm. But Heracles, though outnumbered, fought back with all the strength and skill that had made him a legend. In the end, Heracles emerged victorious, the belt of Hippolyta in his possession. The queen, realizing that she had been deceived by Hera's trickery, offered her apologies to Heracles, but the damage had already been done. The hero, weary from the battle, returned to King Eurystheus with the belt, his ninth labor complete. Chapter 11, the 10th labor, the cattle of Geryon. For his 10th labor, Heracles was sent to the farthest reaches of the known world, to the island of Erythea, where the monstrous Geryon, a giant with 3 heads and 3 bodies, kept a herd of magnificent red cattle. Heracles' task was to retrieve the cattle and bring them back to King Eurystheus. The journey to Erythea was long and perilous, taking Heracles across deserts and mountains, through storms and treacherous waters. But the hero was undeterred, his determination driving him ever forward. When he finally arrived on the island, Heracles was confronted by the 2-headed dog, Orthrus, who guarded the cattle. With a single blow, Heracles dispatched the beast and continued on to face Geryon himself. Geryon, with his 3 heads and 3 bodies, was a fearsome opponent, wielding 3 swords with deadly precision. But Heracles, ever the skilled warrior, fought with all the strength of his divine lineage, his club and arrows striking with lethal force. After a fierce and bloody battle, Heracles defeated Geryon and claimed the cattle as his prize. He herded the cattle across the land, enduring countless challenges along the way, until he finally delivered them to King Eurystheus. But even as he completed his 10th labor, Heracles knew that his journey was not yet over. The king, ever the schemer, had more tasks in store for the hero. Chapter 12. The 11th labor, the apples of the Hesperides. Heracles' 11th labor was perhaps the most difficult yet. He was tasked with retrieving the golden apples of the Hesperides, which were kept in a garden at the edge of the world, guarded by the fearsome dragon, Ladon, and the Hesperides themselves, the daughters of Atlas. The location of the garden was a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few, and Heracles spent many months wandering the earth in search of clues. Along the way, he encountered numerous challenges, including a battle with the shape-shifting sea god Nereus, who finally revealed the location of the garden. When Heracles arrived at the garden, he found the mighty Atlas, who had been condemned to hold up the heavens for all eternity. Heracles, knowing that he would need Atlas's help to retrieve the apples, offered to take the burden of the heavens for a short time, allowing Atlas to retrieve the apples himself. Atlas, grateful for the brief respite, agreed to the arrangement and brought back the golden apples. But when Atlas returned, he attempted to trick Heracles into holding the heavens permanently. Heracles, ever the clever hero, pretended to agree but asked Atlas to hold the heavens for just a moment while he adjusted his position. As soon as Atlas took the burden once more, Heracles seized the apples and made his escape. With the golden apples in hand, Heracles returned to King Eurystheus, who marveled at the hero's success. But there was still one final labor to be completed. Chapter 13. The 12th labor, the capture of Cerberus. For his 12th and final labor, Heracles was tasked with descending into the underworld to capture Cerberus, the 3-headed hound that guarded the gates of Hades. This was a task that no mortal had ever attempted, for the underworld was a place of death and despair, and Cerberus was a creature of pure terror. But Heracles, undaunted by the challenge, set out on his journey. With the help of the gods, he crossed the river Styx and entered the realm of the dead, his presence causing the shades of the underworld to cower in fear. When Heracles reached the gates of Hades, he was confronted by the massive form of Cerberus, its 3 heads snapping and snarling with ferocity. The beast, with its serpent's tail and razor-sharp teeth, was a terrifying sight. But Heracles was not afraid. With a roar, Heracles charged at Cerberus, his arms wrapping around the creature's necks. The hound thrashed and fought, its powerful jaws snapping at Heracles with deadly force, but the hero held firm, his strength unmatched. After a fierce struggle, Heracles subdued Cerberus, binding the creature with chains and leading it out of the underworld. When he returned to King Eurystheus, the sight of the terrifying beast caused the cowardly king to flee in terror once more, hiding inside his bronze jar. With his 12th labor complete, Heracles had finally redeemed himself, his place among the greatest heroes of Greek mythology secured.
Farewell, dear traveler. Your journey may pause for now, but the echoes of our adventures linger like stardust on the wind. Until our paths cross again in another chapter of mystery and wonder, may your dreams be filled with magic and your heart ever brave.